What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Creative Collective Show. Thank you for joining us once again. We went in reverse this time, and we're back to a COVID-styled podcast. We're not going to get into the details why, but it happened. So thank you so much for tuning in again. We have an awesome guest today, Kerry. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Before we get started, if it's your first time listening or joining us on Facebook or on your favorite podcast app, be sure to hit the subscribe button, like our Facebook page, check out what we do. We are a video production company mainly and photography in New Jersey. So feel free to shoot us any questions you may have or any sort of direct message. What else? See, I haven't done this in so
Facebook
long.
Group.
No rude pictures.
What?
Rude pictures.
Yeah, exactly. And then if you're with us on Facebook Live, be sure to comment #live. And if you are watching the replay, comment #replay so that we know that you are with us. We love hearing from you guys. Also, if you have any questions for Kerry while we kind of go through the pod, be sure to ask the questions in the comment section, and then we will try to kind of either hit them randomly or get to them at the end. And that's really it. If you are a creator, one more thing, if you're a creator in the New York, New Jersey area, be sure to join our Facebook group, NJ/NYC Creative Collective. It is a Facebook group for you to collaborate, post your work, find people to work with, hire people, really anything and everything that you could possibly think of a Facebook group. We have made it locally for any type of creative. It doesn't matter if you play video games for a living, or you're an actor, or you do video production or photography. So check that out. And without further ado, let's get into the show.
Hi.
All right, Kerry. Thank you so much for joining us and taking out some time to be virtually with us here today. How you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
Doing good. Hanging in there. So why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers who you are and what do you do?
Who I am and what I do. So who I am is a former newscaster. I was in the broadcast news business, TV, for 20 years, an anchor, reporter, a producer, an Emmy Award-winning anchor. I hate saying that, but I told you, my marketing agent was like, it's back there. Do you see it? It's in the back. Oh, you haven't.
No, can you grab it? Grab it.
You want me to walk over and get it?
Yeah, I want to see it.
I'm actually tape this thing. Okay, hold on.
That's very official. I mean, you got to show it off. Oh wow, they actually give it to you for take home. Yeah. That thing's awesome.
It's very heavy. Hold on, I'm trying to find my name. There's my name. Right?
Very cool.
Tribeca Crane Collapse. Yeah. Anyway.
Awesome.
I usually don't tout this, but the agency I use for marketing is like, what the hell is wrong with you? You need to talk about that all the time. So now I feel compelled to talk about it, even though I usually try and keep it off camera. Anyway, so that's it.
It's a huge accomplishment. That's awesome.
Thank you. I was going to denigrate it, but thank you. So I did that for 20 years. And while I love telling people stories and all that other good stuff, I found myself growing increasingly disillusioned with the state of the news business, not due to any of my colleagues or anything like that. As we all know, the media has taken a bit of a beating, not just in the last 4 years, but over the course of the last 10, some of it deserved, some of it not. I was getting up at 1:30 in the morning to go to work. I was a complete disaster due to lack of sleep. Wow. I have 3 young kids. So I decided I needed to pursue something new. And that something new ended up being, beyond all possible prediction, me opening up a business. And when I say beyond all possible prediction, I mean, I know how to teach people to be on camera. What I don't know anything about or didn't know anything about is running a business. I literally had a networking meeting one time with somebody who's like, you should start a business. And I was like, you're right, I'm going to do that. And I went home and I'm like, let me figure out how to register for an LLC. And then that got things going. But When I tell you I was 6 months in before I knew what a P&L was, that's not an exaggeration. I have literally no idea what I'm doing on the business side of things. Thankfully, I've grown enough that I've been able to hire some people to help me with that. And I can focus on what it is that I do, which is media training, on-camera readiness, video brand storytelling, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome.
That's so cool. And I do definitely want to get into, I want to unpack, how that came to be. And, you're right. There's so much more to know besides like the passion thing that you're chasing to turn it into something that's, like a real income. So let's take it all the way back. Let's go back to, when you like, how did you even become passionate about, getting into journalism and, wanting to do this kind of work?
Well, it's funny that you should say that, because if you ask anybody who I went to high school with, I would be the last person that any of them would have ever expected would have an on-camera career. When I tell you I was painfully shy, complete introvert, extreme phobia of public speaking. I don't mean rational, I'm scared of judgment sort of phobia. I mean, and I say this all the time, I mean, back of the room, puddle of my own vomit, likely in the fetal position, sobbing. That's the kind of fear I have. And so I actually didn't start out in school, in college, as a broadcast journalism major. I started out as a pre-veterinary medicine major. I wanted to be a vet and a veterinary. And a veterinarian is the word I'm looking for. And I did that. I speak for a living. I did that for 2 years. And I realized that chemistry and I were never going to be friendly. I was never going to see eye to eye. We had a bad breakup, and I took a year and a half off from school because I had no freaking idea what it is that I wanted to do. So I took a year and a half off to find myself, which makes me cringe even when I hear myself saying it, but that actually kind of was what I was doing. A year and a half later, I still hadn't found myself. And my school, Clemson University, which is where I did my undergrad, had started a communications program. It's really broad. It was, business communications and speech pathology and marketing and PR and advertising and journalism. And I thought that I would surely be able to find something with which I could use to make a living in a broad program like that. Number one. Number two, I didn't have to take any more chemistry. And number three, maybe I would finally get a handle on this fear I had of public speaking, because I knew I was going to have to take a public speaking course, and probably more than one. So I re-enrolled in the communications program. And I was doubling up on my credits because I wanted to try and make up for lost time. So instead of 12 credits, I was taking 24. And one of the things that I could jam into my crazy schedule was an internship, because I could really set my own hours. And so I could get 3 additional credits, right, without sitting in a classroom. And so I did an internship at a local TV station. This is in Greenville, South Carolina. And I loved it from day one. And so from that point on, I really had to figure out how to get over that fear. And fear of speaking in public is a little different than the fear of speaking on camera. Both of them are related, but the way that you get around those issues can be somewhat different because of the limitations of a camera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd say it was like 6 months into my on-camera career. This is a really long answer. I'm sorry. 6 months into my on-camera career, I finally got it figured out. And I don't mean perfect. I just mean that I knew if I made a mistake, I was generally going to be able to recover, and I wasn't going to make a complete ass of myself. For the most part.
So that was like the main. So the main struggle was really, wrapping your head around, speaking in front of people. Did you know that you like? When you said like you wanted to get into this field, where did you kind of see yourself going in this field? Did you know that you were going to be speaking in front of people? Like, did you see yourself doing that, or were you more like writer behind the scenes, articles in a paper, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I never wanted. I was in a broadcast major, so I didn't see myself writing articles. I liked video. Even before it was what it is now. I liked the idea of using sounds and pictures to help tell stories, right? You can tell stories with sounds and pictures, and then you can add on with the words. And so you can really, it expands the story in a way, visually anyway, that is really hard to do in just a written format. And so I knew I wanted to tell stories with video, but I wasn't sure exactly at that point whether I wanted to be on camera or whether I wanted to be behind the scenes. And so while I took my internship and I put together a demo reel, I did another internship between undergrad and grad school. And at that internship, I worked for VH1, and I worked more behind the scenes in production to try and get a taste for that. And I realized that while I like production and I understand its importance, it's huge. Without that, nothing happens. It doesn't matter how good your on-air people are. But that's not where I wanted to direct my focus. I liked the actual crafting of the stories and telling them. I think part of the reason I was drawn to that is also because I grew up overseas, or for the majority of my childhood, I grew up overseas. And so I was always exposed to different people and different cultures. And I have always been interested in their stories, even if I didn't quite articulate it that way at that young age. And so I think that's part of what drew me into the actual storytelling process. And then I went on and got my master's degree and did another internship. And from there started my career in Wichita Falls, Texas, which is a very
That's it.
Yeah.
That's certainly
Wichita Falls.
Wichita Falls. Yes.
Why does that sound like from a movie?
I don't know. Is it?
Oh, was it Zombieland? They call her Wichita, but that's probably from like Kansas. Isn't there a Wichita, Kansas?
There's a Wichita, Kansas. Yeah, that's much bigger than Wichita Falls.
Yeah, that just sounded so familiar. I was like, where have I heard that before?
That is a thriving metropolis compared to Wichita Falls. Don't get me wrong. I had a great experience in Wichita Falls. I still have friends there. I learned so much, but it is a very small town, and I was not totally prepared for that when I stepped off the plane.
So was there anything you did in particular that like helped you get out of the idea of being, afraid to be on, like speaking in front of people? Do you still have a fear? Is that still there? Do you translate it?
I think that anybody who really cares about what they're speaking about has some butterflies. Even the most accomplished speaker has some butterflies before they get up on the stage, right? And it's because they care about whatever it is they're speaking of, and they care about what their audience A, thinks of them, B, more importantly, takes home with them after they leave the auditorium and you get off the stage. And so to completely eradicate those butterflies, I think is it's a futile pursuit. It's not going to happen. Now, when I got up on the news desk and sat there every day, did I feel butterflies? No, because it was something I did for 6 hours a day, almost every day for years and years and years and years. When there was a big breaking story, like the one that you saw the Emmy for, did I feel the adrenaline and did I have the butterflies? Sure, I did, but it's because I wanted to do a good job. And so people say, how do I get rid of the butterflies? I'm like, well, they're never going to go away entirely. You just have to learn to manage them. And one of the biggest components of managing them is to get away from the idea that you have to be perfect. And I know this is so trite and we hear it all the time. Perfection is the enemy of accomplishment, whatever phrase it is that you've seen on Instagram today. I'm sure there is one. It's probably but the key is, it's true. The key is learning how to recover from the inevitable flubs. And trust me, I have had plenty of them. It's learning to recover and having the confidence to know you can recover and not have that error completely throw you off the rails. Because I have somebody who's a client who's a great public speaker, but holy crap, if he makes a mistake, forget it. It's done. The whole thing is done. He cannot recover. And so that's one of the things we work on, right? People memorize what it is they're going to say. And if something doesn't go in exactly that order or they miss a talking point, many people struggle to recover. I get there. I've been there. I get that. I've been there. See, I made a mistake, but I recovered. So the idea is to plan for the inevitable error, mishap, whatever, technical glitch, you made a mistake in your presentation, and then recover and move on. And really and truly, the only way to make that happen is to practice. I tell people they should if they want to do video, even if you're not going to publish it right to start, record 2 minutes of video every single day, put it on a private channel, upload it to Google Docs, whatever it is. Nobody has to see it until you feel better about it, but record something every single day to start getting used to it.
Love that. I think that's just advice.
Yeah, I was just going to say that because it just allows you to A, be able to critique yourself, and B, think that it's like real. You just got to trick yourself into it.
You have to trick it. And I don't listen. I have people who will do that for months on end. I'm like, listen, at some point you got to like take the plunge, you know, hit publish or whatever it is you need to hit. You got to put it out there. The best way to grow your audience is to ask them what they think. What do you want to see? What do you like about this? What don't you like about that? That's a great way to create engagement and encourage more people to subscribe to your content. But if you don't ever put it out there, that's never going to happen. And there are people who will record videos for months and at some point you just have to do it. In fact, when I do a media training with somebody, when I used to do a training in a studio, for example, and my goal was always to get them on camera at least 12 times during that session. And it doesn't need to be, you know, each half an hour long. Sometimes it's a couple of seconds, sometimes it's a minute or two. But the reason I picked 12 is because for the first 4, people are in such a state of shock about how horrible they think they look and how disgusted they are with the sound of their voice that I can't teach them anything. They have to get through that like initial sort of shock, and then you can start. And it's similar to video. You just have to start doing it and uploading stuff to get through that really uncomfortable phase to the point where you can tolerate looking at yourself and figuring out how you need to improve.
That is such a big point too. And you know, it's funny, I heard another piece of advice, and it was kind of like the same idea of like tricking your brain into like, if you know, I think this more applies to like public speaking as opposed to being on camera. But they said, you know, if you're nervous about speaking, you know, in front of somebody, the idea of being nervous, you go through the same physical, you know, steps as if you were excited. You know, you get the, you know, like the hair in the back of your hair, your neck stands up. You get, you know, you get the chills. You know, you get the whole butterfly thing. And if you can just trick yourself into saying, instead of being nervous, like I'm so excited, you almost can, you know, psychologically trick yourself into thinking that you're actually excited to be on stage instead of nervous.
It's just reframing your mindset about it. It really is. I mean, and that's easier said than done, but it absolutely is. And you can use that nervous energy to your advantage. Use it to energize your speech. Use it for projection of your voice. I mean, but you have to know how to harness it. If you can't harness it, then that takes a little bit of practice as well. We've all seen people who are not able to harness those nerves, and it usually doesn't end so well. But you're right. You can absolutely use that to your benefit. Smart.
It's so wild. It's like such an interesting way to like, you know, you can literally trick your brain into doing something different.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So I wanted to ask you, when you so transitioning over from you know, being being like a veterinarian to this whole different area. What was so I did relatively the same thing. I actually went from being a bio major wanting to be a plastic surgeon and then translating completely. Yeah. And then actually it was really funny. Organic chemistry was like I literally walk in first day and the professor's like, so, you know, there's no curve, you know, whatever you get. And, you know, there's homework every day and 80% of you will fail this class. And I was like, well, I'm out. And I just literally like that. I walked out, I changed majors, and that was it. I actually transferred to Rutgers. I went to school for engineering and literally separated completely. But I wanted to ask you.
Knows. I'm sorry. It's just not happening. Damn it.
No, yeah. When as soon as that happens, I'm like, okay, I'm out. Yeah. What I wanted to ask you is, did you have anyone that like said to you, you know, this is not a good idea, or like, why are you doing such a changeover? You should have stuck with this. Like any naysayers, like in that regard?
Yeah. Yes. My father, for one, who was like, broadcast journalism is insanely competitive. You make no money to begin with. And when I tell you no money, I haven't had a master's degree and I started as the weekend anchor and I was making $17,000 a year. And granted, your money goes farther in Wichita Falls than it does here, a lot farther. That was a while ago, but absolutely. My dad was not super happy with that. And many of my friends from high school who were like, I'm sorry, what? Who are you? You wouldn't even cough in class because you were afraid of drawing attention to yourself. You're going to sit in front of a camera and yeah, I mean, the list of naysayers goes on. And it didn't stop from me transitioning from pre-veterinary medicine to journalism. I mean, listen, the fact of the matter is I, like many people, sent out literally hundreds of demo reels, got calls from news directors in Fargo, North Dakota, who were like, your voice is shit. I'm sorry, we can't hire you, or you look too young, or we already have enough blondes, or I'm sorry, we have another woman.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah, we have another woman. Her last name is Barnett. Your names are too similar. I was like, I'll change my name. Wow. This isn't real. Just tell me what I need to do. And,
wow.
and I mean, it's a competitive industry. I never grew thick enough skin. Honestly, it's gotten a lot better, but Twitter trolls are everywhere now as well, and they creep and crawl out of every corner looking to take you down for every little thing that can happen. So yes, there have always been naysayers, both personally and, audience-wise, viewer-wise, potential boss-wise, but you just have to push through. I mean, resilience is, for all of us, that's where it is. It's pushing through regardless.
For sure. So after like overcoming that and pushing yourself through school, what point of like, was it in school or was it, in the internship or, post school? When did you say like, okay, this is something like I literally want to do, like, I got this, I'm good on camera now and I can take on any role?
Well, I'll tell you this, it definitely didn't come right away. And even when I thought I had it figured out, every now and then there'd be a complete disaster and it would sucker punch me. And I'd feel like I just moved back 3 steps for the 2 I had taken forward prior to that. And so, I mean, I remember my first live shot. I'll tell you this. I remember my first live shot at that little tiny town in Wichita Falls, Texas. And it was at, there was a Red Cross mobile blood donation center. It was November or December. Donations are always low in the wintertime. And they were doing a push to have people come out and donate. And I had seen a reporter at one of the stations that I'd interned at do a very similar story. She was at a mobile donation unit, probably the similar time of year. The Red Cross is always pushing around the holidays. And her first words, and I'll never forget it, were, the parking lot is filling up, blah, 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 blah. And the parking lot was filling up. So I was so nervous for this first live shot. I'm like, I don't know what to say. I was trying to craft my script. So I said the same damn thing. I said, look behind me. The parking lot is filling up. And there wasn't a single car there. It was empty. And so, these are the things you do in a small market. I was like so fixated on words have to be perfect, and I don't know how to make perfect words. So I'm going to use this reporter's words, even though they completely don't fit the scene. But I didn't care, and so I didn't get too much crap for that. But I gave myself plenty, and I would say it was a good 6 to 9 months into that first job before I was able to. I wasn't perfect by any stretch. I'm still not. Nobody is. But 6 to 9 months in, that I felt like I could handle pretty much anything that was thrown at me. Now, I say that with the knowledge that this is a very tiny town. There's not a lot of crazy breaking news. There's not a lot that's thrown at you last minute the way there is, say, in like a New York or in LA. And so when I got to my next market, which was Phoenix, Arizona, which is a much bigger market. It's a large market, from a teeny tiny market to a large market.
Yeah.
That was it's a breaking news market. And you stub your toe, it's breaking news. Everything is ad lib, at least at my station. Everything was ad lib. Everything was very spontaneous. Everything was spur of the moment. And so that was a new set of circumstances that I had to dig down in my knapsack and find a new set of tools to deal with. So each step taught me more about my craft and how to perfect it. But the first and most important step was learning that I had the confidence and the ability, for the most part, to take whatever was thrown at me and, you know, put lipstick on it and turn it into something that was worthwhile being on air. Usually, not always, but usually.
I mean, it's just crazy because it sounds like it's literally a whole different world. You know, like it's not scripted. You're using different tools. Were you using a teleprompter in the Wichita one, or like how did?
I was using a teleprompter when I was at the anchor desk. Yes, except when we had an ad lib question, or you know, there was a quick like toss to the weather person. Well, some of that was even scripted. In Phoenix, I was for the most part out in the field, and I was sometimes behind the anchor desk, but not as often. And so anything out in the field, you never have a teleprompter for. It's at least in that market, sometimes in the network, but in that local news level, you very rarely have a teleprompter. And so all of that was just, you know, I'd have to figure out very quickly how to put a story together in, you know, a couple of minutes sometimes, and jot down some bullet points or at least some numbers if there was something I needed to say that was very specific, and then just rattle it off. And I remember I was really tied to my notepad in the beginning. I was really just focused on everything that I had written down there. And then I had to do a live shot for the Weather Channel about a forest fire around Flagstaff, which has elevation. They have forests. And I remember the photographer was a photographer who had worked at the network level. And he said to me, "Do you need to have that notepad?" And I was like, yeah. But I realized I'm using this as a crutch. I do know it. This was my little blankie that I had with me, and I felt secure with it in case I screwed something up or forgot where I was going. But from that moment on, I learned how to really ad lib, how to talk for 2 minutes about a specific event, make sure I got what the viewers needed to know. And if I didn't, and the anchor asked me a follow-up question, how to rattle off an answer, even if I didn't really know what the answer was, without lying, but with saying, well, we don't really know that now, but what I can tell you is backing out of the question.
Right.
Strategy to fill time on air. And that market was instrumental in me learning how to do that and how to just talk, as you can see that I now know how to do very well.
For sure. This is like a great platform, you know, for this.
Stop. I have more to say. No, I'm teasing.
So actually funny spinoff question for this, because it's actually happening here now. And I'm also curious to see how, I guess, you know, the real world also handles this, is like the lag between when someone says something and then answers. You know, does the other people who are speaking to, like, say someone else who's like in a different state, and you know, like, hey Jeff, what's the weather like over there? Like, you see that you have both heads on screen. Are they can't see each other, right? Or they're not looking at each other, like technically, right?
It depends a little bit on the situation, but for the most part, this is how it would work. And really, different producers structure it differently. And I'll tell you. So let's say I'm at the anchor desk in the studio at 30 Rock. And we have a reporter who is out in, I don't know, we had a reporter in, you remember when Notre Dame, the roof burned?
Yeah.
Years back, right? So we had a reporter in Paris, and there is a delay. There is definitely a delay. And so in a situation like that, if the anchor asks the anchor can see the reporter on the monitor below this camera in the studio.
Oh, okay.
The reporter cannot see the anchor. The reporter is going completely by what he or she hears in their ear. And so oftentimes, if you just had a question, or you were tossing to that reporter, you'd have they check the delay time. You'd have a 7-second delay, or you'd have a 4-second delay between the time the anchor finished their question and the reporter heard everything and was able to start talking. The other way that some producers would handle that situation, and this is if you're in a more structured setting, they would say, okay, we have a 7-second delay. So I'm going to tell that reporter to start talking 7 seconds before the end of your sentence. So don't deviate from what's on the teleprompter. Read it. Don't screw it up. Don't stumble on any words, because that reporter is just going to listen for me to say go, and they're not listening to you. So if you drag on, they're going to start talking in the middle of your sentence.
So that's how that
So
happens.
like give them like lead time.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting.
I love that question, Zach, by the way. That was a good question.
Thank you.
All right.
All kinds of behind the scenes stuff.
All right, quick side fun question.
Yes.
What do you think about Anchorman? And have you watched the morning show?
Oh my God,
Ooh.
I have not watched the morning show.
Oh my God, you have to.
I know. Oh, don't look.
Oh, it's so good. You're gonna watch the whole thing in one night.
I know. In fact, I was just watching, what the heck was I watching the other day? I can't remember what it was. And there was an ad that came up, and I'm like, I have got to watch that, because everybody always asks me if I've watched that, and I haven't watched it. So shame on me, bad former newsie. I need to watch that. Anchorman. Yeah. I did not like number 2. Number
2 is terrible.
Agreed.
Oh,
Agreed. Terrible.
There's so many one-liners from that.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I will tell you, when I first watched it, it's one of those ones that has little Easter eggs in it, and every time you watch it, you like catch a little bit of something that you didn't see before. And so the first
industry-wise?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So stuff that we wouldn't have caught.
I mean, so for example, the I mean, I'm Ron Burgundy. I mean, that has happened, okay, in real life.
We'll put the question mark in the teleprompter.
Yeah, exactly.
He will read anything.
So I worked with a woman, God bless her, she's a sweetheart. But when Kim Jong-il was right, the guy whose father is in charge. You know what I'm saying? Right. It's Kim Jong-un right now. His dad, Kim Jong-il, was the one who has passed away. But when I was anchoring in this particular market, and I won't say where it was, Kim Jong-il was the one who was in power in North Korea. And there was a female anchor at our station who said Kim Jong II, because the IL looked like the Roman numerals in the front of, right? Like second.
Yep. Oh, wow.
So these kinds of things happen. Technically, that shouldn't have been how that was written in the prompter. It really is the producer's fault. I sound like typical talent blaming the accident on somebody else, not myself. But technically, that's not proper AP style for prompter writing. Nonetheless, these things happen all the time. I think they miss some opportunities to mock the industry for taking itself as seriously as it does. And I believe journalism is a serious and important function of our democracy. It is, the fourth estate, and it is urgently needed in a democratic environment. It's urgently needed regardless. But we all know sometimes newsies can be a little bit self-important. And I think the movie could have done a little bit more with that. But I loved it. I still repeat, you may have heard, I'm well over 1,000. It's Tuesdays. It's back and biceps. It's boring, but it's part of my life.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It's the pants. They're flattering in the crotchal region.
It's the pleating of the pants.
I bought them at the pants store.
Oh my God. I think I need to watch that tonight. I watched Step Brothers the other night. It was so good.
Why don't you go back to your home on Whore Island?
I wrote that in my journal.
My apartment does not smell of rich mahogany and many leather-bound books. I don't even have an apartment.
What a great movie. Oh my God. I love that
so
guy.
Good. So many one-liners. Holy crap.
So Zach,
go ahead.
You got a question?
Sure. Yeah. All right. Let me jump in. So you've been behind the camera, in front of the camera, and you've also done producing as well. Is there anything you like better? Like how did you move from role to role? Like how did you get a chance to try out different things?
Well, when you're first starting, you're pretty much a one-man band. So when I first started, I was reporting, I was producing, and I was anchoring. And then when that was in Wichita Falls. And
so
then,
were you finding your own like stories too, or did they give you the story and then
they would give you a story, but you always had to come to the story meeting with 3 ideas, which I sucked at because my ideas were always a little too, they were, I'm like, here's my idea. We're going to fit this into a minute 15 on a local news program, but it's like a New York Times story. Not that I'm smart. My idea.
Yeah.
I'm not a highbrow. My ideas were not what was needed in that town at that time, or in probably most local news stations. And so I struggled with story ideas, coming up with really, really good ones. That was what my weakness was in the beginning. Eventually I figured it out, and I figured out how to turn something that was a story that maybe was a little too broad or complex for TV and make it something simple that I could sell to a producer, right? That's key. Like, how can I take this complex story and dial it into 15 seconds and sell it in 15 seconds and make somebody want to have it on their newscast? Because that's essentially what you're doing at every story meeting, is you're pitching producers and your boss on whatever story it is you want to cover. So you had to come in with three story ideas. And then if they didn't like any of them, they would assign you something else. Or you'd be one of the people who was like, well, wait around the newsroom until something breaking happens. And then, it's 20 minutes to air and you're racing out, like a bat out of hell trying to get to this story before the newscast.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So has that changed? Did you do producing in like the Phoenix level? And then also a follow-up question to that is, how did you move from Phoenix into like the other major networks? Like, how did you start that transition?
So I did not produce in Phoenix. I anchored and reported, and Wichita Falls is really where I did most of my producing on a show level, meaning together the whole show, right? The whole hour-long show. I always produce my own stories, but in terms of the actual newscast, that was where that stayed. Phoenix was anchoring and reporting. Salt Lake City came after that. That was mostly anchoring, some reporting. I went over to Iraq actually when I was working in Salt Lake with the Air Force Squadron at Hill Air Force Base, which is based right outside in Salt Lake City. So I was in Iraq for a couple of weeks.
Wow.
So I did do stories, but most of it was anchoring. And then from there was Philadelphia, where I started as a reporter and then was moved to an anchor position. And then from there to New York City, which was a breaking news anchor position, and fill in regular anchoring.
That's so crazy.
And it's pretty standard. I mean, the business is changing. The broadcast news industry and the cable news industry is changing by leaps and bounds almost daily. And the trajectory or the career path for somebody now is different than it was then. But then the way to start was you started in a small market, and then you sent around 1 million demos, and you found somebody who would pick you up, and you moved to that town. And then when your contract was up there, you did the same thing and you moved to the next town until you got to a place where you wanted to stay. And I eventually made my way to New York, even though that wasn't really ever one of my career goals to get here. But it was just kind of a happy circumstance or situation. And then once I got to New York City, I left.
So you made it all the way to the top, and then you're out.
Yeah, done. See ya. Yeah. That's pretty standard for at least for somebody who's been in the business for the amount of time I've been in it. That's how we all started.
That's so did you have like a general roadmap for like how you wanted to get to where you're going? Or are you kind of just like going with the flow, and wherever you happen to land, that's where you're
totally going with the flow? Part of the reason is because, there's I think 212-ish markets in the US, and markets by market, I mean, like, so New York City is the number 1 market. LA is the number 2 market. It's done by population. Chicago is number 3. Philly is number 4. Dallas is number 5. And so I knew I wanted to get to a large market, but I also knew that each market was lucky if they had maybe a handful of spots of something that I wanted. It's not like you move to a town and, there may be, I mean, I'm going to sound like a jerk when I say this, but maybe there's like I don't know, a lot of sales positions in a number of different companies, right? There's 2 or 3 stations that you have to look for a job in a market. And if one of them has a position that you're qualified for, that's really great. And so I didn't have, I'm going to go from this market to this market to this market to this market. I was just like, I'm just going to move up. However, what threw a little wrench into that whole non-plan is that I met my now husband at my first market in Wichita Falls. So he's a fighter pilot, or he was anyway. He flew F-16s, and he was training fly at Shepherd Air Base, which is in Wichita Falls, randomly enough. And so I didn't have a choice as to where I was going to look for my job. He was military. His assignment was always going to supersede whatever was coming next for me. So I had to follow him. So I followed him to Phoenix because that was his next base. And I had to find something and make it work there. I followed him to Salt Lake City. I had to find something and make it work there. I followed him to Philadelphia. I had to find something and make it work there. And then the first time we've ever moved for my job was when I got the call from WNBC in New York. And at that point, he was out of the Air Force and he flies for Delta. He's actually based out of JFK. So that was an easy move for us to make.
that worked perfectly.
Doable.
That's crazy.
Yeah. It worked really well.
Wow. And then to also think, to kind of put that on the whole thing where it's like you said, there's only so many positions. There's only it's not like there's 10 or 12 of each position for you to choose from. Like it's literally you 2 and then 1. You're like, there's not many. And now you're also narrowing down, with your husband, which city now you're forced to look in. And I'm shocked that you were able to make it work under those strict conditions. It's like what a crazy filter to go through.
Nobody's more shocked than me. Okay. Like I still wonder how it happened or why it happened, but it worked out. I mean, who knows? Maybe I would have done even better had I not been with him, or maybe I was able to ride his coattails into the next market. I have no idea. It worked out well
sure.
enough.
Do you have any favorite stories, or like any that leave, say, like a lasting impression on you as a person, and then say also on your career?
So I think, gosh, I guess I have tons, but one of the ones that I was really fortunate in that I never, as far as I know, I never really worked with a lot of jerks. The news industry can be filled to some degree with egos. I was always incredibly lucky to work in newsrooms that were supportive. One of my favorite reporter friends from Philadelphia, when I first moved there, she pulled me aside and she said, listen, we have a rule here. And the rule here is no girl on girl crime. And that's how we roll. And that's how this newsroom functions. And I'm really lucky because it's not just a girl thing. It's also a guy thing. It's a competitive business. And as soon as you have a bigger position, there is immediately a target on your back. And you're always looking behind to find out who's younger and who's cheaper and who's coming up behind you. And so I've always tried to live my life as a colleague and a coworker and as a friend to that same degree. So all of that to say, I got really lucky with most of the people that I worked with. There was one, however, and he tested me to my core. And he was a co-anchor at one of the larger markets. And he was insecure, and I took that on myself. And I'll give you an example. I've told this story before, but I'll tell it one more time. I just had my second or first. I just had my first child.
Congratulations. Oh, hey. No, you had just had.
A long time ago. I got 3.
Okay. I thought you said I just had. I'm like, oh, awesome.
Back then, 10 years ago, I had just had my first child. I have 3 of them now. My youngest is 3. That's okay. My wording was poor. I can understand.
You're good.
That conclusion. So I had my first child, and we were anchoring some breaking news about a hurricane, and we were on the desk for hours together, we're like 14 hours straight. And somebody reached across the desk to hand me some scripts, and I reached like this, right? And I went forward, and I'm not at my goal weight, right? I'm still like, I'm a puffy mess. And this guy reached across and grabbed the back of my arm and said, wiggle, 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 jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. How's that diet going for you? I guess not so good, huh? And in the moment, it was devastating, because as a woman in this business, you're already hyper concerned about viewers' perceptions of you, and your news directors are telling you that dress looks like crap on you, or you're too heavy, or I don't like your hair color, or whatever. And so I'm, you know, and we're back. Hi. And that was a moment that I had to dig down and pull something out that I did not really realize that I possessed. And what I realized in that moment is that I cannot let other people's issues affect how I feel or how I work. And I didn't realize I had that in me. I really didn't. Like a mean comment on Twitter could take me down for a couple of days. But we all have that. It's just a matter of sometimes being tested enough to find it. And what feels like an awful situation, or a situation in which your self-esteem is put on the line. We all have that ability in us to some degree to be able to pick ourselves up and keep pushing forward. And the show must go on. And now I use that in every single thing I do. It doesn't matter how bad I screw up. It doesn't matter how crappy I'm feeling about myself. That's just how it is. You put one foot after the other, and you put on a good face, and then you go cry in the corner if you have to, but the show must go on. And that's the only way you make any progress.
Wow.
Boom. Love it.
Boom.
Love that.
And that story you better watch the morning show, and then
okay.
you need to shoot me an email after you watch it.
I will.
Yeah. I only watched the first episode, and I'm already like,
what are you doing? What are you doing?
I haven't had time.
Jeez.
I'm trying over here.
Oh my God. Watch it at like 2 a.m. That's the way to do it.
I know.
That's the only time
I can't stay up until 2 a.m.
Yeah, usually I can't either.
I'm like 12:30, 2:30 Netflix, and come out.
No, I hear you. Except usually it's like 9:30 for me.
So let's talk about how you pivoted to you're doing now, right?
Yeah.
So what did that look like? Was it a gradual thing? Was it a big jump kind of thing? And then I want to talk about how you started building your clientele.
So I like I said, I jumped out of TV news about a year and a half ago now. And I hadn't built a runway for myself before I left. I hadn't done anything. I had no freaking idea what was coming next. And so I was networking with people, you know, either in the business, outside of the business. I started a LinkedIn page. You didn't know one of those. And I just started poking around and connecting with people and I joined a chamber, which I didn't even really know was a thing. I mean, for them, but people are members. When I tell you I didn't know anything, I mean, I really didn't know anything. And so I was networking with a woman who does PR and communications for a big law firm in the city. She's in LA now, but at the time she was in the city. And she's like, you're crazy to consider going back into the corporate world or do PR at an agency, because agency clients inevitably end up hating their agency that they've hired. And you are now also dealing with answering to a boss, and you have the skill set that you have created over these 20 years that people need. People don't know how to do any of this, whether you're working for a corporation or whether you're helping a small business owner figure out how to put a video together. You can do it. And I'm like, you're right. I never thought of that. And so I literally stood up from that meeting, was in the city, went home and told my husband, right there on that couch behind me, that I was going to start a business. And he was like, like you're overdrawn on your checking account all the time. So how do you plan on running a business? And I'm like, I don't know, but I'm going to figure it out. I've never taken a business course. I definitely don't have a business background. In fact, I'm not even really all that interested in business. But I like what I do. And now that I've learned a little bit about business, I enjoy the process of growing and creating and figuring out how to do things that I really like. And so I had no strategy, none. I spoke with a reporter in Miami, a former reporter who had started her business. And her advice to me was, take any sort of speaking engagement you can get, anything. I don't care where it is or who you're talking to, anything. And then just post it, start posting it places so people realize what it is you're doing now. And so I did. I would speak at high schools. I would speak at colleges. I would speak at chambers. I would sign up to do, in-person stuff. And I didn't charge anything for it, but I would post it everywhere. And that was my strategy for getting my word out. And really, that's how everything started to grow. And I recognized, although I understood the value of public speaking because of my career, I didn't fully understand how valuable it was for the business owner and how you can really scale your reach and scale your credibility and your authority through public speaking. And it offers you a huge opportunity, not only to be paid for the speaking engagement, but also to sell your product or your service. And then when I started to put all of those pieces together, I figured out kind of what I needed to do next. And then it was video. And then I started putting videos out everywhere. And that's really where I started to gain traction was video content on LinkedIn, honestly.
Awesome.
That was my whole strategy.
Yeah, LinkedIn's untapped. A lot of people see it as this like kind of annoying thing that it's just another platform. But there's a lot of opportunity for or a lot of organic reach there, especially if you build it with people that around you as well, right?
100%. Yeah, I've found LinkedIn to be one of the easier places to grow a following and B, get engagement, at least with my clientele.
So my next question to you is, being a fairly new business owner, what is some advice that you could give someone else that you've learned along the way?
Oh boy, don't do it the way I did it. Listen, I will say, I think I came into this. I never worked in marketing. I never worked in finance. I never worked in accounting. I was strict. And the selling part of news was like the icky part. As the journalist, you don't want to have anything to do with the selling. Your story was your story, and it was pure and pristine. And you didn't care if people watched it or not. You just knew this was an important thing and you needed to tell it. You left it to the producers and the marketing team to sell it because that was yuck. So I've had to get over that sort of like, ooh, sales. And I still feel that way a little bit, but I've realized it's kind of important. And the one thing that I would say is, if you are getting ready to launch a business, before you leave whatever it is that you have, if you can do this, I didn't. And I wish I would have built a runway for myself before I left. And by runway, I mean, I wish I would have started the networking process before then. The other piece of advice that I can give to anybody who is, well, two pieces. Put yourself out there. Again, anywhere anybody wants you to talk about your business, your product, your service, whatever, motivational sort of something or other you want to put out, talk. Don't even wait till you have your message. If somebody calls you and says, can you speak at this event tomorrow, and you're brand new in business, yes, you can make it happen as long as you're not already booked. But speak and put out video, and then try and put people around you who know what it is you're doing. When I first started my business, I did not have money for a business coach, but I knew that not hiring one was going to be more detrimental to me in the long term, because I know I didn't know anything about business. And so one of the first things I did was hire a coach, and who helped me figure out how to structure invoices and how to do follow-up and how to all of that stuff that I had no idea how to do. So put people around you that know what they're doing in the areas in which you do not know what you're doing. And I know it can get expensive, but I don't know, maybe you can barter. I don't know. There's a million things you can do. Put smart people around you. That's my third piece of advice.
Okay. Love it.
Yeah.
I had a question regarding, so you said like, you said try to speak at anything, try to get out and, just do what are some of those things either that you've used or other people have used in the beginning as like speaking platforms to talk about whatever their industry is? Is there any any specifically?
So one of the things that I did, and my industry is a little bit different. I mean, I had somewhat of a mild name recognition because of my time on the news. And so if I reached out to, a high school and said, hey, I worked at NBC. You want me to talk to your broadcasting students? They would usually say yes. And if I said, hey, I was a woman during the Me Too age of broadcast news. You want me to speak to your women's studies students? They would usually say yes. And so while I couldn't, depends a little bit on where you are, whether people have to sign media releases, et cetera, et cetera. But even if I couldn't show myself speaking in the classroom, I'd always take a selfie of myself up in front of the, that was redundant, a selfie of myself. I hate when people do that. I would take a selfie at the front of the class or have the teacher take a picture, and then I would push it out. I would say, on LinkedIn, I would dive a little bit further into the content, and on Instagram, for example, I would just say, keynote speaker or motivational speaker along with a little caption or whatever, and I would just start putting that information out there so that people who saw me on either of those platforms would hopefully realize what I'm doing. And after they see enough of it, would consider inviting me to speak at their event. And that's what happened. So then the Fashion Institute of Technology in Manhattan had me come in and talk to their broadcast students. And then other schools had me. And then I met people, through those events, and they asked me to come speak at their chamber. And then somebody saw me at the chamber event, and then they asked me to come speak at their chamber. I mean, it's just really growing it. It's a long play. It's not immediate, but speaking on camera or on stage is a great way to grow and scale. And what I didn't do correctly in the beginning was that I never created a clear call to action at the end of my event. I would just give everything away for free. And then I would like, but nobody called me for a consult. I don't understand why. And then I finally hired the marketing agency, and that's because you told them everything. They don't need to call you anymore. So I've gotten a little bit more strategic about how I speak. But if you're just starting out, just speak, and then plaster it everywhere you can.
I really love that. You gave so much advice right there that we say in all of our other podcasts, but it's so good to hear from your perspective and to hear it just be proof of concept that what we're saying works. It's just like how we say, like, document what you do, diversify your content. If you're posting something on LinkedIn, you go into a little bit more detail. If you're posting on, Instagram, that same piece of content, maybe talk about it a little bit different, the story a little bit less, however you want to diversify, but you can definitely make multiple pieces of content from the same, event.
Exactly right. Because on LinkedIn, for example, is very often for me like B2B. So maybe a company will see, or somebody who runs a company will say, oh, I see you do this like motivational keynote stuff. Do you think you could come in and talk to our employees about whatever it is that you do? On Instagram, who is there? It's probably parents, and certainly parents on Facebook, and students. So the way I describe what I do there, it's a different audience. And maybe a student or a parent says, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Do you think that's happened. Do you think you could create a program for my student around this on-camera stuff that you teach? So it's just the way that you approach the picture may be the same, but it's the way you approach the story behind the picture that's a little bit different on the different platforms.
For sure. Now, I wanted to bring up, because you said that, and it's true, public speaking versus speaking on camera is very different. When you did you do real public speaking, like besides the classes that you took in college? Because obviously you did that in school, then you did the whole, on camera thing. Was there a weird transition to go to the public speaking space? And did you have to, was there a weird growing pain from going from one to the other?
No, I mean, it is different, and it's different because you're in front of a room of people and you get very self-conscious because there's eyes on you. But the cool thing about the room too is that you can read it. That may sound awful, and you may think, I'm not going to read the room. Oh my God, what if everybody's like looking at their phone and how do I get their attention? Like, there's good and bad, but you can read the room. The first time I did a webinar after I left the news business, and I did a solo webinar where I couldn't see anybody's face and I was just talking for half an hour, I was like, oh my God, my lips are numb. I don't know what anybody.
That's so hard. I know.
I'm talking.
It's so much different.
Mm-hmm. It's wildly different. So I taught a public speaking class at Kean University, and of course, we had to morph at the end of last semester from an in-person public speaking class to an on-camera public speaking class, which is quite different. You know, you're not working a stage, if you will, when you're sitting in front of a camera. There are elements that overlap with both of them, but it was two sets of skills that I had to learn, but I learned them simultaneously in the news business. And the reason I learned them simultaneously is because all of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that the viewer doesn't see on camera. And so what does that mean? It means you're in front of a newsroom of 100 pitching stories, public speaking. You are hosting charity events to an audience of hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe in a stadium. That's public speaking. You are creating keynotes for commencement addresses and you're delivering them. That's public speaking. You are doing a charity auction, or you're hosting the, Race for the Cure, or the March of Dimes, or whatever it is. There's so much public speaking that goes on for the on-air talent of a TV channel that's not on camera, that just has to do with events. So both of those were things that I had to learn at the same time. And you will find actually that many on camera talents really don't like the public speaking side of things because they never kind of reached out and took and kind of grabbed those opportunities. They prefer this because you're kind of in character when you're on TV. When you're in front of an audience, you can feel very exposed. But if you try, you can learn both of them at the same time, learn how they overlap, and then learn how you need to separate them as well. Again, a very long-winded answer to your question. No, there was no awkward transition. I know.
It was really good. You really went into a lot of detail that, I wouldn't have thought about. So it's awesome.
Thanks.
Have you ever
excruciating minutia, but thank you.
Have you ever done a TED Talk?
I've not done a TED Talk. It's on my list. In fact, it is at the top of my list of things to do, along with write a book, which I'm in the process of doing. But
very cool.
I was really starting to dive into the whole TED Talk thing when the pandemic hit. And I realized they're still doing some virtual-ish sort of things, but I'd like to wait until we're back in full gear and in full swing, and you can do them with crowds of, large crowds. So I'm going to put that one. I'm going to table that idea for the next 6 months or so, and maybe work on creating the speech and all of that other stuff, and then start the application process when the world is open again.
Okay. When the world is open again. It's crazy to think about.
Yeah. When humans are allowed to hear.
Right, yeah.
Zach, do you have any other questions? I want to finish this out.
I do have one other question, yeah. What was the question? It was
Okay.
Oh yeah. I remember. Okay. So you said you had just decided to jump off. There was no runway. You didn't build any kind of platform for yourself beforehand. You said, I'm just going to jump in and do it. Did you know exactly what you wanted to do? Like, did you know you wanted to train and help, people build up their brand and do it in that way? Or did it morph into that as you went?
I had no idea that that's what it was going to be. I mean, I was applying to places like, Delta Airlines and their communications team. I was applying to PR agencies. I was applying to media agencies. Nothing that really sparked my, oh God, that's for me. I love that job. I totally want to do it. And so regardless, I had no idea that I was going to be doing, or that I even wanted to do what I'm doing in the capacity of a business owner. That all of that stemmed from meeting that woman who worked in PR and comms for that law firm, and it all blew up from there. I had no idea, none.
It's insane. I love that.
I'm glad I didn't, because holy shit, had I known how freaking hard it would have been, or it is, I love it, but I might have taken pause before jumping in and really do it. Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna finish this one out strong. You know, we do a lot of video, right? What is something or a couple tips that you can give the average person that maybe owns a business, works for a brand, that's about to be on video, either to do before they're on video? And I know we talked about one, doing like the whole recording yourself thing, but any other tips to feel more comfortable in front of the camera, or be more prepared for any type of delivery via video, whether they're recording it themselves or they're, you know, hiring a production company to help them produce content?
So you want one? I'll give you 3 tips. 3 tips. One that I always get when people are doing a Zoom call or any sort of video call is, where the heck do I look? I don't know where to look. I feel like I should look down in the monitor, but if I'm looking at the monitor and I'm talking, you can clearly see that I'm not looking at this and I'm not talking at you. So when
that's
you
happening
are
to me right now because of a bigger screen.
I know.
She's like, I've seen it. I saw
Don't be distracted by the wrong face. Look away. So no, when you are talking, look into that camera lens, the one that is top and center of your computer, because the whole point and purpose of video is to facilitate a connection with whomever is on the other side. And if the video portion were not important, and if the eye contact portion were not important, you would do this via a phone call. So you are missing out on one of the greatest elements that these video communications allow, which is for the person on the other side to feel like you are looking them in the eyes. It is the simplest but an easiest way to gain rapport with your audience member or your viewer. So many people fail to do it. So look into that camera right there, that thing that's covering me right now, when you are talking. The follow-up question that I get to that is, well, when I'm looking in there, I can't look at their body language. I can't, like, I can see you guys down kind of below me, but I can't really see what you're doing.
You can't read the room, if you will.
You can't read the room, right? I don't know whether you're liking this or hating it. And so what I always suggest, right? That's just one of the obstacles of life in the age of Corona. So what I suggest is that people, when they're done talking and their other person is talking, that's when you look down into the monitor. That's when you try and recoup some of that lost nonverbal and body language elements that you miss when you're looking into the camera and talking to them. Also, make sure you turn off your phone when you are doing a Zoom call. Was that your phone?
No, that's ice cream.
That was
right?
Ice cream man. Yeah, I was gonna close the door, but
we can excuse you just for a hot second. We're gonna SpongeBob pop.
I'm gonna get a choco taco. I'll be right back. Always bad.
I couldn't even blame you.
I know, me neither. Or a screwball.
So look in the camera.
Oh, he's right.
It was very loud, but I'm really hungry. It's 6:22 and I haven't eaten yet. Oh
my God. All right, so look into the camera.
Look in the camera. Look in the camera. And when the other person is talking, you look at them when they're in the monitor. The second thing that I always advise people to do is, when you are on camera, the camera mutes everything. And by that, I mean, if you think you have a lot of energy, go back and watch yourself on camera, because chances are you do not, because the camera, it's 2D, right? You're flat, and you have to overcome that by amping up your energy. And you almost have to feel like you're over the top to look normal when you're on camera. So amp up the energy. And sit down and sit in front of Zoom and record it yourself for 2 minutes giving a pitch, and then go back and watch it and see if your energy matches the way that you felt as you were actually saying the words. In all likelihood, it doesn't. So amp up the energy. That is my second tip. And
that's so funny that you say that real quick, because when you go back and watch a video, so me and Zach go to a lot of like concerts and shows, and you go back and watch the video of the crowd, and it's like everyone looks like they're standing still, but you're there, and it's the craziest thing ever. That's such a
Yep.
This is exactly what you have to start. You have to get comfortable with feeling like you're over the top. And I realized that in that first 6 months of my TV news career, when everyone was like, why are you so tired? I'm like, oh, I'm not tired. Oh, I look tired. You're right, I do. And then the third piece of advice I would have for somebody who is, we've done a couple of Zooms. Let's talk about a piece of advice for somebody who is trying to create a video for their business, something they're going to post on LinkedIn. I would say this: people get very attached to memorizing what it is that they're going to say. So I've seen videos with people who are dynamic in person when they're just speaking. Then they've created a video for themselves on LinkedIn, and it's so clear that they've memorized the script because there's weird pauses and they're trying to think of the word, and they've connected from the words entirely because they're just focused on getting the word right. And so what I always suggest is, if let's say you're going to create a 2-minute video, until you get really comfortable and you can just flip on the thing and start talking, what I suggest is doing this manuscript. And by that, I mean, write out exactly what you want to say in the ideal way to say it. And then so your thoughts are organized, and hopefully you can organize your audience's thoughts, and then pull from that your 3 main points and create bullet points and talk using those bullet points. Do not memorize your script. If you memorize your script, every time you screw up, you are going to, I almost said the F word. Anytime you screw up, which I know is okay because you warned me before we had this call.
I did.
I censored myself. It's from my years on TV. Damn it. Shockingly, I've never cursed. So don't memorize. It sounds fake. It sounds canned. It sounds stupid. And it sounds like it's rehearsed. What you need to do, and if you screw it up, then you have to go back and start over again. If you're just pulling those 3 points and you're ad-libbing your conversation around them in a structured way, you can ramble or take a turn or two. Not ramble, that's bad, but take a turn or two that's not strictly with that manuscript, and you can recover and move on. It'll make the process of putting that video together much more efficient, and you will sound much more authentic and real. That's my third piece of advice.
That's literally what we tell everyone when they want to memorize the script. I was like, listen, like, I'm going to ask you a question, and then you're going to give me a response. And then the more takes that we get into it, they try to recite the first or the good take. And I was like, if you do that, like, every take after that is just deteriorating and deteriorating and deteriorating, because we're not, unless you have a really good memory and a really great delivery, that does not work. Or you feel really comfortable on camera.
Right. I always say when I'm doing a Q&A, so a lot of times I'll host a Q&A for a business owner who wants to put some video together and they don't want to sell. They're just going to answer my questions, and that makes them not have to sell. They're just dutifully answering, but they want to know the questions in advance. Usually I don't give them the questions in advance for that very reason. People study the questions, they rehearse their answers, and then the answer sounds rehearsed, and it sounds canned, and they sound disconnected. And for that reason alone, I very rarely give questions out ahead of time.
Yeah, no, it's so really true. Those are great.
Yeah.
So, Kerry, where can everyone find you, and what's next?
What's next? What's next is I'm releasing a series of digital courses because people are not doing as many in-person, keynote speaking or live group training events. I have kind of tabled that portion of my business, at least until the pandemic is over. I do some virtual stuff, but not a ton. And I have started releasing online and digital courses. So I have the first course that came out is for high schoolers who are doing all of their college admissions and all of their high school work virtually on camera. Same for college students, same for job seekers, people who are looking to re-enter the workforce for whatever reason. They are either just looking to re-enter or they lost their job because of the pandemic. So they're having to interview virtually, which many people are uncomfortable with. So that is my next, I have one out. The other two are coming out next Monday. And then there's a whole series after that. I'm working on writing a book, as I think I mentioned. So those are my big projects that I have in the next 6 months. Where you can find me. You can find me on any of the social media platforms. Oh, there, look, you have it at the bottom. Thank you.
Gotcha, I got you.
It's Kerry, Kerry Barrett, Barrett. Again, you can find me on all the social media platforms. You can also go to my website, which you guys have kindly put up at the bottom of the screen. You can also email me, Kerry at kerrybarrettconsulting.com.
Awesome. Zach, bring us home, dude. You're gonna end this one. I fumbled the beginning.
It's okay. It's okay. We're new to this whole, or back to new StreamYard anyway.
Well, months.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to the Creative Collective show. I'm glad you guys have made it this far. Our viewers, if you're still with us, comment #live. If you're watching the replay, comment #replay. Be sure to check out the entire episode once this is done at strixmedia.com/podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. There we go. I'm trying. Apple Podcasts. We're on. Where else are we?
Spotify, Stitcher,
Stitcher. Yeah.
Amazon. I mean, Google. Oh, and the thing I forgot to say is that if you're watching this right now or listening to it, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We haven't had a review since March. We need a review. We need to let the people know how awesome these are.
I'll log on immediately following, and I'll tell you how great.
All right.
Oh, you're amazing. You're amazing. Everyone follow Kerry's suit and do the same thing. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Kerry, thank you again for taking the time. You spent an hour and 16 minutes with us. I really appreciate that. And you dropped so much knowledge. I'm sure every viewer and listener is going to take a bunch of information and take it and run with it, and create their own business and get ready for their public speaking career as well. So thank you again, and we look forward to you guys being on the next one. Take care. Over and out.